they haven't spent the time really embedding themselves with the grower to figure out like exactly where the manageable action actually comes out of.
1, 2, 3.
Coming up on episode 310 of The Modern Acre, we're talking to an AgTech company and a grower on the same conversation, something we haven't done before, but we're having Dave Boer from Myland and Joe Quello, a pistachio grower in California, talking about the experience of growers working with AgTech companies. All right, Todd, we talked about it earlier this week. I dabbled my toe in jiu-jitsu, kind of getting a little, hand-to-hand combat, just kind of like amping things up. You're kind of going the other route. You had a different experience recently. Talk to us about your new workout routine.
Tim, I love to zag. Like when everyone is doing, into the cold plunges and sauna, jiu-jitsu, I zag. My zag was I was in a ballet performance last weekend.
Yeah, I got a picture of you and it looked like a sparkly shirt. This is like the craziest zag I've ever seen.
So for context, I was in a daddy and daughter ballet recital with my 4-year-old, and man, I just got to come out and say it. I crushed it. We crushed it. It was, multiple practices for this recital. It was to the song Popular. It's in the Wicked soundtrack. If you know, you know. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. Actually, I really leaned in on this, Tim, and I've been thinking about this parenting philosophy. It's like a lot of parents, they just want to do stuff that, they did growing up, and scratching the itch of I golf, so I want my kids to golf, right? And they're just trying to relive all these things. And I think the best advice I've heard is no, it should be the opposite. Whatever the kid loves, you should love just as much, right? And just if that's your thing, I'm going to be so into that thing. And so I used this. I had been thinking about that, and then this father-daughter dance came about, and I was like, here's my opportunity. I'm going to be so in. I'm going to work harder than any of the other dads. I'm going to take it super, super seriously because my daughter is taking it seriously. And so that was a ton of fun. And I worked so hard, Tim. I was in the front row of 3 lines. I got picked for the front row. They put the best dancers in the front row, and we crushed it. So it was a ton of fun. Mom and dad came, actually, which is funny. They came I actually don't think I told them that I was going to be in it. I was just for them to come watch the girls, and then boom, Tyler's doing ballet. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah. Dad just missing your basketball practice, but makes it to your ballet recital.
Exactly. So that was a lot of fun. I don't know if you'll see me up on stage again, Tim. I think it was kind of like a one and done thing, keep the people wanting more. I crushed my performance, but yeah, I don't know if I'll be back.
More to come.
All right, guys. Well, excited for this conversation to dig in with Myland. We've had Myland on the podcast before. They have a really interesting, unique solution for soil health on farm. And, oftentimes we have AgTech companies on the podcast. They talk about their latest and greatest, what makes their product unique. And that's all really cool. But I think this was really fun to hear from a grower directly of how they think about soil health and adopting regenerative practices and working with an AgTech company. So I think this is a really interesting lens, whether you're a farmer, whether you're an AgTech founder, to hear from a grower themselves about how they're evaluating and implementing this technology. Hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Let's jump in. But before, a word from our sponsor, PF Partners. Hey guys, quick message from our sponsor, PF Partners. Growing your business in the agriculture space in 2025 is maybe harder than it's ever been. Investor funding has dried up, growers have tighter budgets than ever, and overall, it's just hard to go to market. PF Partners, a consulting firm with over a decade of experience scaling successful AgTech solutions globally, has just launched a new webinar on optimizing go-to-market strategies in the agribusiness space. It shows you what's changing in the market, exactly how to deal with it. Everything is backed by research, and it's about go-to-market plays in the ag sector that you can use tomorrow. So if you're ready to turn your go-to-market efforts into results, go to themodernacre.com/PFP or text MODERN to 55444 to download the webinar for free. That's themodernacre.com/PFP
or text MODERN to 55444.
Gosh, top of mind today is tariffs. Where I work, that's been asked the most. Is that normally top of mind? No. Many other issues, but it's the same old thing that you guys have heard many times before, that we're always trying to make more with less, right? So labor, water, pesticides, residues, lots of problems are top of mind.
Dave, what about you? What's top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, on our side, for sure, it's trying to understand how can we best serve the market, right? We do a lot of activity in Arizona, Texas, California related to water efficiency, water utilization, and so the current challenges are not really going away. So trying to figure out how we can study deeper in those particular areas, how can we best aid the grower in helping address those challenges. And then we look at other spaces too. A thing that's popped up here of late is, looking at, nutritional density in food. How can things that were changing with soil health translate to plant health, then translate to the quality and the nutritional components of the food that are getting produced? Obviously very cursory in that and that dig, but something that's starting to bubble up as we start to dig in a little more on how some of these transformations are occurring between soil health and plant health.
Totally. Well, we're excited for this conversation. We talk to a lot of ag tech companies and a lot of farmers, but not often on the same call. So it's going to be awesome to dig into kind of how the two join forces and what a customer experience looks like, and how you both are working together. So Joe, let's start with you and maybe just talk to us a little bit about your background and what led you into agriculture.
Well, I've born into a fourth generation family farm in Fresno County, California, rooted in dairy immigrants from the Azores. My dad was a dairyman and degree in dairy science, and sometime in the early 80s got into row crop farming and started farming onion, cotton, tomatoes. We've always had permanent plantings as part of the portfolio since the 60s. Family planted almonds, and then we've grown lots of tree fruit. That's kind of been shifted more into nut crops, walnuts, almonds, pistachios, and things like that. So more backgrounds. Went to Cal Poly. I have a PCA, CCA, QAL, nitrogen specialist, sustainability specialist, and I work for the family farm as an advisor, essentially. Well, as a crop advisor on about 5,000 or so acres. In almond and pistachio. But my main job is I'm the director of sustainability and member outreach at American Pistachio Growers, where I don't have a hybrid role, but I kind of live a bit of a hybrid life, where I have management duties on the family farms, but my duties at American Pistachio Growers is to work with our growers and assess their pain points and to derive solutions from them. And in the process of deriving solutions, I perform research, and I've done that with various jobs that I've had prior to moving back to the Valley, which I did strawberries for better part of a decade, and I moved back to the Valley in about 2013 or so, and was the director of agronomy for a major grower on about 52,000 acres prior to making the jump over to American Pistachio Growers. So research-minded and really just trying to deliver solutions on a number of levels based on what grower pain points are. And in that case, I do have a lot of skin in the game because I experience most of those pain points simultaneously. So I'm looking for interesting solutions, kind of how I came to meet and work with Myland in terms of solving issues with soil water infiltration, salinity, and stress management, and a number of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's get into that next before we jump to kind of the Myland solution. Like, tell us, what are your biggest challenges or priorities when you think about farm management? There's a ton of headwinds being a farmer in California, specifically right now. Like, where are you spending your time and energy looking at opportunities? Can you kind of like walk us through your mindset there? Because I think a lot of growers, it's almost too overwhelming. There's too much thrown at them in terms of options and new technology and now different management practices? Like how do you sift through all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you got to kind of priorities in part in terms of what you need to be working on, and I have the same primary issue as most growers in Fresno County, which is scarcity of water and water deliveries and sigma implications. So, what can I really do on that? I mean, there's solutions based on what GSA you're a part of in terms of what sort of crediting implementation practices you're putting together for on-farm recharge, or for basins and things like that. And as much as I could advocate as a grower, a lot of these things kind of come out of my hands. So making the most out of my water is a really important thing. Trying to find ways to, well, use less water and achieve the same results, the same high yielding results to sustain my profitability as a farmer first, is really probably it's really the water's the lifeblood of the farm at the end of the day, and everything kind of comes second after that. And there's certainly other issues in terms of labor and the cost of things, salinity, especially when you're using groundwater and you don't have those surface water deliveries, um, among others. But really, it does come down to water in a lot of ways, and again, that inferior water quality can compound the effects of a lot of different things in terms of soil water infiltration um, and pH management and just overall stress on your crops, and otherwise constrict your yields. Um, so yeah, I'd say water, cost of things, and then the other issues that surround poor water quality generally are some of the things. Labor's, it's on the list somewhere. And pistachios and almonds, it's not a lot of mass labor activities technically because we're not hand harvested. I say the pruning crews were affected mostly. Still a huge issue in agriculture where things are hand harvested, and some strawberries is definitely probably, I would say that's second issue to water.
No, that's super helpful. So now let's, I guess, jump into how the relationship got started. Dave, maybe you can speak to kind of your approach scaling up in California, how you got in touch with Joe and really had the conversation about solving some of these pain points that he was having.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise that the Central Valley is a target market for folks looking at the agricultural community. A lot of higher value irrigated crops, as well as and kind of what Joe spoke to there, some challenges associated with whether it be salinity issues, water penetration, just looking at how to extract the most out of the crop possible. And so that's really where Myland evaluates markets kind of based off of some of those same factors, opportunity, irrigation, because our system does require irrigated ground to be able to be utilized, at least it does today. And so that was why, you look at the geographies that we're in, really kind of targeted those markets. And that's kind of what brought us to the Central Valley. I think Joe came as a conversation from the American pistachio growers, if I remember correctly, how this whole thing started. You get people who are, if you look at the bell curve of adoption, you're trying to find those folks that are always on, kind of that front quarter of that, or even front 40%, to be able to look at who's open to looking at innovative things. As Joe mentioned, he came into a fourth generation farm, and we've got, people that are fifth generation, sixth generation farmers. And some of those are extremely innovative. And some of those are still, still waiting to kind of watch others do some things. And I think Joe came to the forefront as someone who tends to be innovative in the approach, has his own compost outfit on farm there as well too. And so was, I think, open to trying a lot of different things, as far as the farming operation to look at, how do we materially make change?
Have you guys know Jonah Parker of Myland?
Yeah.
So Jonah called me a few years ago before I was at APG, actually, and he was referred to me by one of my coworkers that had attended the American Pistachio Growers Conference that I was not at. And, and I had never heard of Myland. I'd never thought of microalgae. I don't even know if I had ever even heard the term microalgae. I immediately thought seaweed, but Jonah kind of told me what they were about, and it's like Arizona soil taken from 0.6% to 4% OM in 4 years. Like, I was like, all right, it's been nice talking, but and he's like, no, wait. So I continue to listen to his theories, and it's like, okay, well, that's very interesting, and I do try to stay on the innovative end of things, and I appreciate you bringing up the distribution of growers. I love it because I always love to show this. Like, most growers copy their neighbors. Upper tail innovates and the lower tail goes out of business. I keep it there just for the sake of discussion. you know, so many growers just wait around to, for the solution to present itself over the fence at their neighbor's place. I don't really do that, So I started the conversations with Jonah right away, just because I mean, the claims were crazy at first to me, and I didn't want to like immediately call witchcraft on this stuff, but the the theory behind feeding the biology in the soil, um, and what's coming from that match some of the findings, or just really kind of tapped into some of the experiences that I've had in organic farming of almonds and pistachios, where um, I've seen higher carbon to nitrogen ratios due to more carbon-based fertilizer and more crop residue turned into the soil, really helped me lower my nitrogen rates to achieve really high yields, and that don't match what the textbooks otherwise suggest. And I was like, well, maybe I could look at that deeper and try to take it to another level and look at it further. So let's start talking. So we started talking, and at the time I was the agronomy director for big corporate farm, and you know which corporate farms like to just check boxes for organic certification, or they want they count their pennies, and they try to farm pretty tight, and they really want to be institutional and fairly status quo in approach. Although they gave me a lot of liberties to try to innovate and to test things, and then we would implement where it made sense for sure, based on research that I do. So this sort of thing, it was definitely novel and wasn't like readily accepted, and it took me a bit of time to convince. And ultimately Peter met with the COO, and after me squawking in his ear for about a year. But prior to that, I already had moved to install my own system on my family farm. So we installed roughly 1,000-acre system on our own, and I've been making applications now for over 2 years. So that's kind of how we came to meet. Pardon me.
Dave, maybe talk about a little bit about your system and what makes it unique. I think that this is something that's sometimes hard for growers to wrap their heads around, right? Because another thing growers like is the standard model, right? The standard model for how things work. And you come out and say, hey, we're going to put this system on your farm and generate things on farm. Like, how do you kind of message that and get growers comfortable with that?
Yeah, I always start, you kind of got everybody has their elevator speech, right? Because, I always say, growers are, get sold a lot of things on the front end and the back end. And so, there's a kind of a natural level of caution, I think, as we look at things. And so, kind of one thing we try to frame up as far as, my land and what we're trying to do is, we're a soil health company, and that, that always means a lot of things to a lot of people when we say that, right? But our mechanism for going about that is we utilize live native microalgae, to influence biological, physical, and chemical changes in the soil. And as Joe mentioned earlier, as soon as you hear algae brought up, they're thinking of the filamental, clumpy stuff in the canal or the pond that we're trying to kill. And so then the conversation kind of moves a little bit towards what we're utilizing is unicellular algae, so 10 microns or less. So we've been through every type of irrigation system that exists, and it's not a clumping type substance. And so a couple things as we bring out uniqueness to what we're trying to accomplish is the native component. You heard me say live native microalgae. So native, is always a question on efficacy. A lot of people don't understand that, algae is present in all agricultural soil types. You can find it in something that looks like beach sand. You can find it in a heavy organic matter soil. Like I grew up in Central Illinois, and it's going to be present there. The when people think about efficacy is they don't understand that it's already there. It's just there at consumptive levels today. And so what we're trying to do is take that native algae that's already accustomed to the geography, the water type, farming practices, even cropping, various crops that have hit that ground, and really, up the amount of the algae that's in the soil to be used as a food source for the microbial community, as kind of Joe mentioned earlier. And I've got Jeff Tool, our rep in California. He has an example of ringing a dinner bell. Is how do we continuously ring the dinner bell for the biological community to be able to feed on? Because as we see increased life from a microbial standpoint, that's when you start to see those biological, physical, chemical changes start to happen. Second component of that is live. So why there's value in bug in a jug type stuff as a carbon source, the live component, if you will, is a little bit of the secret sauce from the standpoint that unicellular algae can divide every 9 hours and live for, a couple of weeks, depending on who you listen to. And so it's not just the amount that gets put on, through every irrigation cycle. It's the fact that it's going to hit the ground and replicate and replicate and replicate and So then it's just it's a whole process that comes in. And now it's you talk about efficacy and how much is you're really starting to cover, from an amount put on. And so it's been really interesting to take people through that journey from what their initial version of, like Joe mentioned, I heard algae, you guys are crazy too. Wow, that's really unique. And then the fact we put a system on farm that then produces the algae from that field, puts it back on that field. So very unique from a process standpoint and how we go about isolating the algae, how we put it back on the field and the system. Kind of our soil as a service model, if you will, and the fact that we have a mantra of no two farms are alike. And so that's really the case with this, that we're not trying to take something from, that we produced in a biofermenter somewhere and put it back on farm. We're taking it from that farm, putting it back on that farm just in copious amounts, so that it really stimulates the microbial community.
You said the key word too, that it's a service based, and so part of my problems is just having enough time in the day to do everything. So if I'm trying to replace like what I now see, what I'm doing with microalgae with other solutions, all that means that I have to do a lot. There's a lot of processes to go through. I gotta make an order. I gotta write a PO. I gotta have trucks come in and out. I have to unpackage things. I have to mix it in a bubble. I have to apply it in the water, and then I have to clean it. And I have to, there's a million processes, and that's for one thing. It could be sulfuric acid, or it could be infuric, or it could be, something. Lots of different things that I could say that I'm solving, with one thing. But just having it as a one-stop shop for a lot of different solutions is fantastic, and saves a lot of headaches at the end of the day. No paperwork. I don't have to, necessarily. I don't have to call this a fertilizer. I don't have to change my INMPs or anything like that, and I can ultimately just replace the number of inputs. I could tell you more about that here at some point, but the service-based approach was enticing as well, and it was enough for me to say, well, let's look at this further and try to dive into exactly what I can measure, what really matters that I should be measuring out of this. And it's a lot of things that I've seen so far that are kind of first time in my career to see something move the way that it is, and some of the changes that I've seen that are very shocking. So service model is great. The fact that it's live, native, it's totally unique, and I never heard of it. And again, I don't have any skin in the game here. I don't have to advocate for this, but in terms of what my pain points are, time being one of them, I feel like I'm approaching solutions here that I could solve cost effectively, and I could solve multiple problems with one thing. And not only does that affect me, and I'm buying into it on my own dollar here, but then these results, I can then share with 850 growers that I represent in American Pistachio Growers. And that's a really powerful thing to me because they're all facing similar issues. Um, so yeah, I mean, those are a lot of the reasons why I decided to jump in. So I guess I jumped in before I went to APG because I don't want to solve my own. Now I've just really grown it at this point.
When you think about adoption of technology, I think to Joe's point there, I think those are some of the biggest obstacles, right? Is ease of use. How easy is it to implement anything? And then is it scalable? And then efficacy or ROI, right? And those are always going to be the kind of the key lead indicators. And that's a few of the things we've tried to address. Ease of use because my land operates the system, not the grower. So, unless there's a a move or a bubble trailering of algae to various spots in the farm, most of the time it gets just injected right into the irrigation or on site, and so the grower really doesn't have to do anything. So as far as ease of use, they're scalable. We've got systems that range in size from smaller farms. Like we've got 100-acre systems out there to, as Joe mentioned, there's a 1,000-acre system that's installed on his farm. So and everywhere in between, we continue to provide new iterations of systems out there. And then efficacy, does it deliver on the bottom line? Does it allow you to reduce particular inputs or address how you're using those inputs? And then the output side of the equation from an ROI and or quality standpoint, yield and or quality that really gets you into marketable product and what you're receiving from that. So I think any adoption of technology, if you can simplify some of those things, as far as barriers of entry to adopting the technology, it's typically a little quicker path in.
You guys had been before too that you're talking about, like, well, how do you sift through, what to implement to solve your problems, and when you talk to growers, and I'm really not that much different, you got to be considerate of the economics of the practice, and ROI comes up all the time, especially when I talk to growers and they might not really understand what I'm even talking about something, and I say, all right, well, what's the ROI? And so the ROI on this, like at the point that I'm at, is, well, it's pretty easy to say that I'm replacing certain units, and there's dollar amounts that are associated with those things, certain inputs, and so I was able to do a really nice bit of research right off the bat with this, and then I have newer things that are going on, and I'm trying to measure what's most important, and those are some of those issues around water and around salinity, around soil water infiltration in particular. And I tell you that what I'm seeing so far is it's, I could say that, like, and some of the replicated work that I did, that I definitely replaced over $450 worth of inputs on, say, a couple tons of gypsum, some K-Mag, some Tiger 90, biologicals, and humic acid on, saline sodic soil. Didn't really have the boron, but we're talking like 50% base saturation sodium, talking triple digit chlorides, just, otherwise stressed trees, and replaced all those, plus cut nitrogen 30%, and saw the exact same performance, but the various metrics on soil health, however you want to define that, but at least in terms of total nitrogen, total organic carbon, seed-in ratio, OM, aggregate stability, all these things were highly significant really fast. So, you can show that to somebody and say, well, all right, so what? Like, that's great. Did it change anything? Well, yeah, I replaced a lot more than what this cost me to do.
I'd love to get into that a little bit more. I think this is always
Sure.
the chicken or the egg conversation, right? You have to figure out, I want to increase my soil health so I can reduce my input use, right? Like that's the logic, that's the reasoning. But how and when do you decide to do that, right? Is it like you invest in soil health up front in year one, and then year two you can start pull back? Like how do you do that operationally, and how do you decide how much to cut back?
Yeah. I mean, well, firstly, like, I said this the other day in a meeting, but it's not like we haven't been trying to farm for soil health forever. Like, what does soil health mean to you? Does it mean soil that drains well, that has good cation exchange, that has a biodiverse microbial community, has nitrogen use efficiency, it has all these various characteristics that we've been trying to farm for. We've just been using other inputs. And we've been guided that way from, I guess, our education system, from our crop advisors, I'm sitting right now at the UC Cooperative Extension in the raisin room. And that's what they teach us, So how do I figure that out? So, well, something like this, that's novel, that this institution hasn't taught me about, you got to kind of take it on your own shoulders and consider, well, you have to research it and you have to measure. If you just put something out there and you aren't making careful managements simultaneously, then you don't really know what is causing what. I mean, I think that if you begin to trend in one direction without having, replication, then it's more than likely the new input, especially if you've been doing it over a long time. But still, it's incumbent upon you to try to qualify that spend for what you're trying to make happen, and not everyone necessarily is willing to do that. So, and then you get to that point, and like, okay, well, I'm improving these various characteristics in the soil. Now, am I seeing an enhancement of my yield? So it's you improve your net by either reducing your cost and or enhancing your productivity, and your gains are higher, right? So I love to do both. So am I doing both? I could say that, like, I don't need to spend $450 an acre in every case. Like I put a Mylan system somewhere where I did need to, so I can quantify that offset as an ROI. Past that, where I might just spend $100 an acre a year, then what benefits are there? And that $100 an acre to maintain or do maintenance, soil amending, and things like that to maintain the health that I do have, that could change year to year depending on the quality of the water that you're putting on and the amount of water that you have to put on. But then, okay, if I'm spending X amount with my land, then I need to also capitalize on enhanced productivity as well. So you got to measure it. So, and that's actively what I'm doing. I'm being very cognizant about my spend because, as well as like what else I'm putting on. It's like, yeah, Dave mentioned that we produce compost. We produce like 40 to 50,000 tons a year, and we don't sell it. We just put it on our own ranches. It's from a lot of our own ag waste, and previously from the cattle at our dairy. But, how does it work with that? Like, what benefit do I get out of putting algae treated water on top of that, which compost has a microbial community of its own? And if I enhance that community, do I get enhanced, organic matter decomposition and more of my nitrogen when I'm top dressing compost? Can I count on, other things in higher availability, or what? And then how does it play with anything else that I may keep in the system? Because that's what the grower, AKA my dad, wants to do. If he wants to put on some humic acid, or he believes in doing a microbial, which, I guess that's not necessarily the case. But if any grower is making that consideration, it's like, how does it play with those things? So those are things that I'm actively trying to skin out as I continue to look at this, and and how much do I apply to where? What's the adequate rate of application? So at the end of the day, I feel like the spend that I'm making is like, I'll tell you more specifics about what I'm seeing here as well, but I consider it more of a capex approach, an investment over a period of time. Suffice to say, I'm seeing it in a lot quicker time than a long run, versus an OpEx sort of day-to-day spend where I just put on gypsum and it gave me a 2-week effect of improved soil, water, infiltration. So look at these things as an investment over time, but surprisingly and happily, things are happening quicker than not.
That's super interesting. I think that's a challenge that every farmer faces. Is every farm is different, and really trying to evaluate when you bring one new product into a system and there's 100 variables that happen, it's really hard to kind of like see what's happening. So it takes time to really dial in what's happening there. Joe, would love to you speak to just kind of like the psychology of kind of how you integrate a new technology. Like anytime we bring a new product on the farm, it's you might be replacing another product that impacts another party, whether that's ag retailers or PCAs, and every farm is kind of in a different position, whether they have that in-house or they're reliant on a retailer. Like talk to us about your approach there of like what that means, kind of disrupting, less purchases of traditional crop inputs.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to one of the original questions about kind of defining your priorities, and then then you got to filter the guys that walk through the door with the products, right? So you guys deal with it on your farm. I'm sure people come and say, well, I got this, shiny new toy, or I got this new product, and give it a try. Here's what it's going to do. And here's our great, data sheet shows them and us, and it's like, okay, well, that's cool. So I think you kind of go back to your priorities, and it's like, theoretically, could that help me down the road on one of my major pain points? Okay, maybe. Now let's maybe take our conversation to a next step. Let's take it from the lunch. We'll from a office meeting to a lunch. And then we talk about it a little bit further. You kind of get comfortable with the guys that are selling it and their knowledge of the product. You hear a little bit more about their data, how they design the data, make sure that the data isn't misleading. And I would say that like a lot of people don't know how to necessarily interpret things. And I'd say as well that people probably intentionally put together data sets to show growers that are BS. I see that all the time. So yeah, I try to do a bit of due diligence when we look at these things as well. Again, I show you my little bell-shaped curve thing. It's like I in a lot of my conversations with growers, like I'm not acting like I'm a unicorn or anything, but like a lot of people just anecdotal is good enough. Like, yeah, so Jim got, an extra 400 pounds an acre. Let's do what he's doing. Well, maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. There's a lot of variability out there, but, so again, like some of these retailers, some of these guys that, are incentivized to sell certain things, like, well, they can produce misleading data and sometimes they actually shoot themselves in the foot. I got a great picture on my phone of a foliar nutrient company. I went and listened to their spiel, and like they had like these little bar graph deals, and they put ROI on the top. It was like grower standards down here, and then here's us enhanced, and us triple enhanced. It's like $800 ROI, over the grower, and then had a p value of like 0.4, so it's like, and then a sample size of like 2, and it's like, yeah, so you're telling me then that there was no difference between the things here. And it's like, that's entirely misleading to say that there's some sort of like an ROI, and, and sometimes as well, like statistical designs could be, that you can compute them, but they're actually flawed logic. I see that a lot when we research navel orange worm, because it's such a moving target, and it has so much like peripheral influence from mummy pressure and things like that around that. Like when you have scientists that will say, well, we have 4 sites that are being compared, or we have 2 sites and then 2 sites, but really comparing 2 sites, we replicated it over a 3-year period. So we can compute this as statistically significant. It's like, no, that's flawed logic, man. Like that's not a great enough sample size to really capture the variability. So, so I do try to make a bit of an assessment into how credible any sort of offering is. But, I guess it still comes back to like, what are my priorities that I'm trying to address? And, and I can file some of these things into sounds cool, but is redundant. And there's a lot of that. And tech, especially, I participate in various like startup roundtables and like incubator think tanks, just kind of as an advisor. Because so many have come through the door, especially if I'm at this big corporate farm previously, and even now where I'm at, representing a large footprint of growers, like people want access, or they want access to your footprint, whether you're farming at all or you're farming none of it. and they don't always capture what is deliverable to a grower and meaningful to a grower in any way, but that they think they do. They haven't spent the time really embedding themselves with the grower to figure out like exactly where the manageable action actually comes out of something, and that's usually pretty troublesome to me. And those ones I'll usually file into cool idea, bro, but we'll call you if we're interested, or somebody already has something like that's redundant. One trick pony is like, and if you're a one trick pony, that pony better be a freaking champion racer, I mean, I guess technically Myland offers one thing, but that has many, 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 potential solutions and many potential enhancements. I wouldn't call them a one trick pony, although it's one thing. But when it comes down to tech, guys will offer you one measurement where the other company will offer that plus 19 more. And then they got this whole dashboard. It's like, well, I don't need all 19. So let's look at that guy. Let's look at that guy. Next thing you know, you got 20 different dashboards going up on the top. It's like, I just want them in one place. And so try to nullify the redundancies and just look at the priorities at the end of the day.
Well, this has been super enlightening hearing your story, why this has been so helpful and beneficial to you. As we kind of wrap up, how can listeners get in touch? I'll let each of you go. Joe, you can share how any listeners that want to get in touch with you, and then Dave, you can follow after.
You can find my contact info on the American Pistachio Growers website at americanpistachios.org under contacts. Alphabetically, I'm the first one on the list. And shoot me an email or shoot me a text, and happy to talk with anybody that's listening about this.
Yep. And on our side, obviously, myland.ag is the website. So you can reach out to us via there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I try to post a fair amount there. So good content there. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us anytime.
So Tim, what'd you think?
Super good catching up with Dave and Joe, learning more about the latest going on there. Really interesting just hearing about their approach of like Myland working with an influential grower that has the respect of kind of the local region, and like their relationship with Joe started before he had his role at American Pistachio Growers and like blossomed into something where he could be kind of a force multiplier to get them in front of more growers in that region and kind of Fresno Bakersfield. So I love that approach for ag tech companies to grow and scale, is really like, who are those going to be your core advocates early on that have, the local influence that their neighbors trust, that their peers trust, as a way to scale up ag tech versus kind of more of a scattergun approach.
Totally agree. Well, guys, appreciate you listening. Hope you enjoyed that bonus episode. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Make sure you're connected with Tim and I on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you. Appreciate you listening.